Elizabeth Taylor's Beverly Hills mansion, a sprawling estate nestled amid lush, exotic gardens, has long been an icon of old Hollywood glamour. Built in the 1940s, it was a sanctuary for the actress, offering respite from the pressures of stardom. Yet behind its gilded facade, whispers of ghostly encounters have trailed the estate for decades. Before Elizabeth purchased the home in 1954, it belonged to silent film actress Thelma Todd, who died under mysterious circumstances in 1935. While official records attribute her death to carbon monoxide poisoning, rumors of foul play and her entanglement with powerful figures in Hollywood left lingering questions. The property changed hands several times before Elizabeth acquired it, but tenants reported strange phenomena: a woman sobbing, doors creaking open by themselves, and mirrors inexplicably cracking. Elizabeth, ever the skeptic, dismissed the tales as melodrama. However, those close to her claim she experienced unexplainable occurrences almost immediately after moving in. In her diaries, which were unearthed after her death, Elizabeth wrote about an unforgettable night in 1956. While rehearsing lines in her living room, she felt a cold breeze despite the summer heat. The antique chandelier began to sway gently, its crystals chiming like a whispered warning. Suddenly, a shadowy figure of a woman appeared at the edge of her vision. She was dressed in a gown from another era, Elizabeth wrote. Her face was pale, her eyes full of sorrow. She mouthed words I couldn't hear, but her anguish was palpable. I froze, unsure whether I was seeing a ghost or my imagination had taken flight. When she turned to look directly at the figure, it vanished. The gardens, which Elizabeth loved to tend personally, became a focal point of supernatural activity. Gardeners often refused to work alone, citing the eerie sensation of being watched. One described hearing soft laughter when no one else was present. Another claimed to have seen an ethereal figure drifting among the flowers late at night, illuminated by moonlight. Elizabeth herself once confided to a friend that she felt the garden held a unique energy. It's beautiful but tragic, as though the earth remembers the pain of someone buried deep within it, she reportedly said. The most chilling discovery came during renovations in 1971. While refurbishing the wine cellar, workers uncovered a concealed door leading to a hidden room. Inside were crumbling photographs, handwritten letters, and personal belongings dating back to the 1920s. Among the items was a journal belonging to Thelma Todd, detailing her fears of being watched and expressing distrust of her closest associates. Elizabeth, unnerved by the find, instructed the workers to reseal the room. But afterward, the ghostly activity escalated. Guests frequently reported hearing disembodied whispers, feeling cold spots, and seeing reflections of figures in the mansion's many mirrors. Elizabeth Taylor spent her remaining years in the home, often joking that it was haunted by the heartbreaks of Hollywood. After her death in 2011, the mansion was sold to private buyers. They too have reported unsettling experiences, from unexplained electrical malfunctions to objects moving on their own. Though the house remains a private residence, its reputation as a ghostly hotspot endures. Some say the spirits are drawn to its history of passion, betrayal, and tragedy, a reflection of the very industry that made Elizabeth Taylor a star. After Elizabeth Taylor's passing in 2011, her beloved Beverly Hills mansion was sold to a wealthy couple drawn by its storied past and lush gardens. The new owners, Claudia and Michael Harrington, were collectors of old Hollywood memorabilia, enchanted by the idea of living in a house where icons once walked. But from the moment they moved in, the estate's glamour seemed to veil a sinister undercurrent. The Harringtons' first weeks in the house were marked by peculiar disturbances. Claudia, a professional photographer, began noticing strange anomalies in her work. Photos taken inside the mansion often came back distorted smears of light, blurred shadows, and occasionally, the faint outline of a woman in vintage clothing. One evening, while unpacking boxes, Claudia found an object that hadn't been there before. An antique pearl brooch, tarnished and dusty. Assuming it was a lost heirloom of Elizabeth's, she pinned it to a board in her study. The next morning, the brooch was gone, replaced by a brittle scrap of paper with a single word scrawled across it: leave. Michael, a rationalist and skeptic, dismissed his wife's growing unease as an overactive imagination. But even he couldn't ignore the chilling events that followed. A month after moving in, they began to hear faint whispers at night. The voices were indistinct but persistent, echoing through the hallways like a distant conversation. Then there was the incident in the wine cellar. While inspecting the space for renovations, Michael discovered the hidden door that Elizabeth had ordered sealed. Curious, he forced it open. Inside, the air was cold, and a strange metallic smell lingered. He found no artifacts, only a bare room with faint scratches on the walls, as though someone had clawed at them in desperation. That night, Michael awoke gasping for air, feeling as though invisible hands were pressing against his chest. Claudia found him drenched in sweat, unable to speak, his face contorted in fear. The Harringtons hired a local gardener to restore the overgrown grounds to their former glory. One morning, he approached Claudia with a grave expression. "Ma'am, this garden has seen things," he said, his voice low. "I've worked here before years ago when the actress lived here. There's something in this soil that won't stay buried." When Claudia pressed him for details, the man shook his head, refusing to elaborate. He never returned, leaving his tools abandoned near the rose bushes. The most terrifying event occurred one stormy evening. The Harringtons were hosting a small gathering when one of their guests, a historian fascinated by Elizabeth Taylor, mentioned seeing someone in an upstairs window. "I didn't realize you had staff living on the property," he remarked casually. Claudia froze. The upstairs wing had been unoccupied for months. She excused herself and climbed the creaking staircase, her heart pounding. As she approached the landing, the temperature dropped sharply. At the end of the hallway, a woman in a 1920s gown stood motionless, her face obscured by shadows. Claudia blinked, and the figure vanished. In its place, the hallway mirror cracked, splintering outward as though struck by an invisible force. The house seemed to grow more malevolent with each passing day. Claudia began waking up with bruises on her arms, as though gripped by unseen hands. Michael, once skeptical, now refused to enter certain rooms after dark. The final straw came when Claudia found an old photograph tucked under her pillow. It was the same image Elizabeth had once discovered, the shadowy figure of Thelma Todd standing beside the faceless man, with the word liar etched across the bottom. That night, the whispers returned, louder and more coherent. They spoke of betrayal, vengeance, and a buried truth that the house refused to let go. The Harringtons fled the mansion after only 6 months, leaving everything behind. The property, now abandoned, sits in eerie silence, the gardens wild and untamed. Local legends speak of ghostly lights flickering in the windows and the faint sound of sobbing echoing through the hills. No one dares to live there now. The house waits, holding its secrets tight, while those who pass by swear they feel unseen eyes watching from the shadows. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story. The Harringtons abandoned the house in haste, their possessions left scattered as though they had fled in the middle of the night. For months, the mansion stood vacant, its once pristine gardens growing wild. Neighbors spoke of lights flickering on and off despite the electricity being disconnected. Some claimed to hear faint strains of music drifting from the empty ballroom, while others swore they saw shadows moving behind the curtains. Months later, the property caught the attention of a mysterious buyer, a reclusive historian named Dr. Evelyn Marlo, who specialized in the hidden scandals of Hollywood's golden age. Evelyn was intrigued by the whispers surrounding the mansion, convinced it held clues to a scandal that could rewrite history. She moved in with little fanfare, bringing only a suitcase and a collection of old Hollywood archives. From the moment she entered, the house seemed to react. The air felt heavier, the creaking of the floorboards more pronounced. Still, Evelyn dismissed these as symptoms of age and disrepair. Her focus was on the hidden room in the cellar. Records indicated its existence had been deliberately omitted from the mansion's blueprints, and Evelyn was determined to uncover why. On her second night, armed with a crowbar and flashlight, Evelyn pried open the sealed door. To her surprise, the space was no longer empty. Shelves lined the walls, filled with artifacts that hadn't been there before. Faded photographs, yellowed scripts, and a collection of jewelry. At the center of the room was an ornate vanity mirror, its surface cracked and clouded. Evelyn noticed something odd. Her reflection didn't move as she did. Instead, it seemed to study her, its head tilting slightly to the side. A sudden sound broke the spell. The faint hum of a woman singing, coming from somewhere deep within the house. Among the items in the hidden room, Evelyn found a leather-bound diary. Its pages were brittle, the handwriting erratic and urgent. He promised to protect me, but they all lied. The house remembers. It will not forgive. The entry was signed with initials. TT. Evelyn's pulse quickened. Thelma Todd. Could the rumors about her connection to this house be true? She flipped through the diary, but entire pages had been torn out, the edges singed as though someone had tried to destroy them. That night, Evelyn awoke to the sound of footsteps outside her bedroom. Gripping a heavy flashlight, she stepped into the hallway, where a cold draft prickled her skin. At the far end of the corridor, a figure stood shrouded in shadow. Evelyn couldn't make out its features, but she felt its gaze boring into her. "Who's there?" she demanded, her voice steady despite the chill creeping up her spine. The figure didn't move. Instead, a door beside it creaked open, revealing a room Evelyn hadn't yet explored. Before she could react, the figure dissolved into the darkness, leaving the door ajar. Inside, Evelyn found an antique phonograph playing a scratchy tune. The record spun, though the device wasn't plugged in. She recognized the melody immediately. It was Thelma Todd's favorite song, a piece often played during Hollywood galas of the 1930s. Over the next few days, Evelyn's investigation deepened. She discovered that the house's original blueprints showed a second, larger basement beneath the hidden room. It wasn't on any official plans, but a structural anomaly in the foundation suggested its existence. Determined, Evelyn hired a contractor to help break through the cellar floor. The man lasted less than an hour before storming out, pale and trembling. "There's something down there," he muttered. "Something that doesn't want to be disturbed." Evelyn worked alone, chipping away at the foundation until she uncovered a narrow staircase descending into the darkness. At the bottom, she found a heavy iron door etched with strange symbols that seemed to shift when she looked at them too long. The closer Evelyn got to the door, the louder the whispers became. They weren't coming from behind it but from within her own mind, weaving stories of betrayal, murder, and buried truths. Her hand hovered over the rusted handle, but before she could open it, the whispering stopped, replaced by a single, clear voice. "Don't." Evelyn froze. The voice wasn't pleading, it was commanding. Against her instincts, she stepped back, her flashlight flickering as the air grew colder. But she couldn't walk away now. She had to know what the house was hiding, even if it meant facing whatever lay on the other side of that door. Evelyn Marlo stood frozen at the base of the stairs, the iron door before her like a monolith of dread. The voice, low and commanding, still echoed faintly in her mind, its warning unmistakable. But curiosity had always been Evelyn's greatest flaw, and the allure of unraveling the mansion's secrets was stronger than her fear. She touched the door's cold surface, her fingers tracing the strange, shifting symbols. The metal vibrated faintly under her touch, as if alive. When she pressed harder, the vibration ceased, replaced by silence so profound it felt unnatural. Reluctant to open the door just yet, Evelyn retreated to the safety of the main house. She pored over the diary she'd found in the hidden room, hoping for a clue. Her attention fell on one entry. The door beneath it was never meant to be opened. "It holds what he feared most. They think I don't know, but I hear it at night. Scratching. Waiting." Evelyn shuddered. The cryptic words raised more questions than answers. Who was he, and what was waiting? The next day, she returned to the basement to find something had changed. The iron door was slightly ajar, though she was certain she had left it sealed. A faint, metallic smell wafted from the opening, mixed with a scent she couldn't place: earthy, damp, and sickly sweet. The activity in the house escalated after the door was disturbed. The once whispering voices became clearer, each one distinct. They spoke names she didn't recognize, fragments of conversations from decades past. "She'll ruin everything. Promise me, this stays between us. If the truth comes out, we're all finished." Evelyn started seeing shapes in her peripheral vision, figures darting across hallways, shadows pooling where they shouldn't, mirrors fogged without warning, revealing glimpses of faces she didn't recognize. One evening, she caught sight of a man standing in the garden, staring up at the house. He was dressed in a suit from the 1930s, his features shadowed beneath a wide-brimmed hat. When Evelyn approached the window to get a better look, he disappeared, leaving behind footprints in the dewy grass that led straight to the house. Unable to shake the feeling that the answers lay behind the iron door, Evelyn prepared to descend into the basement again. This time she brought a camera, a notebook, and a voice recorder. The door, now fully open, revealed a steep, spiraling staircase carved from stone. The walls were damp, covered in strange markings that seemed older than the house itself. At the bottom was a circular chamber with a cracked mosaic floor. In the center stood an altar, stained dark with something Evelyn hoped wasn't blood. She set the recorder on the altar and began documenting everything, her voice steady despite the oppressive atmosphere. But when she played the recording back later, her words were drowned out by a deep, guttural growl. That night, Evelyn was awakened by the sound of shattering glass. She bolted upright to find the mirror in her bedroom cracked, its fragments strewn across the floor. As she approached, she realized the shards formed words, jagged but unmistakable. "Leave while you can." Evelyn's instincts screamed at her to listen, to pack her belongings and never look back. But the historian in her refused to let go. The house had chosen her, or so she believed, and whatever was hidden beneath it was something the world needed to know. The next day, Evelyn developed the photos she had taken in the chamber. Most were clear, showing the strange altar and the surrounding symbols. But one image stopped her cold. It showed the chamber as it had been decades earlier, pristine and filled with people. Men in suits and women in gowns gathered around the altar, their faces obscured as though the camera had deliberately blurred them. Standing at the center of the group was a figure Evelyn recognized instantly. Elizabeth Taylor, her unmistakable violet eyes glinting with something between fear and defiance. The photograph was impossible, yet there it was, and the implications were chilling. As Evelyn studied the photograph, a knock echoed through the empty house. It was soft but deliberate, coming from the front door. She hesitated before opening it, finding no one there, just an envelope lying on the threshold. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a message scrawled in elegant handwriting. It wasn't supposed to end like this. The signature at the bottom made her breath catch in her throat. E.T. Evelyn stared at the note in disbelief. The elegant signature E.T. sent chills down her spine. Could it really be Elizabeth Taylor reaching out from beyond the grave? Or was this an elaborate deception, the house itself playing games with her mind? She knew one thing. The only way to uncover the truth was to return to the chamber beneath the house and confront whatever was waiting for her there. Evelyn descended the spiral staircase, gripping a lantern in one hand and the enigmatic photograph in the other. The chamber felt different this time, warmer, almost alive. The whispers had returned, louder now, overlapping until they were almost deafening. At the center of the room, the altar seemed to pulse faintly, as if it had a heartbeat of its own. Evelyn placed the photograph on its surface, and the moment she did, the mosaic floor began to glow, revealing a circular pattern she hadn't noticed before. Suddenly, the room was flooded with light, and the whispers silenced. Evelyn blinked, her surroundings transforming before her eyes. She was no longer alone. Around her, the chamber had come alive with ghostly figures, their translucent forms reenacting a scene frozen in time. Men in tuxedos and women in glittering gowns gathered around the altar, their faces solemn. At the center stood Elizabeth Taylor, her beauty radiant but her expression haunted. A man stepped forward, a figure Evelyn recognized from the photograph. His face was shadowed, but his voice echoed with authority. "If the truth comes out, it will destroy us all. The pact must remain." Elizabeth's voice cut through, defiant and filled with anguish. You can't silence her forever. She deserves justice. The scene shifted. The altar was now stained with fresh blood, and a lifeless woman lay upon it. A figure Evelyn realized was Thelma Todd. The spectral gathering dispersed into shadows, leaving Elizabeth standing alone, tears streaming down her face. She turned to Evelyn as if aware of her presence. "It was never supposed to end like this," Elizabeth whispered. "You must finish what I couldn't." Evelyn gasped as the vision faded, leaving her alone in the dim chamber. The whispers returned, now louder than ever, forming a single word that echoed in her mind: justice. Piecing it together, Evelyn realized the mansion had been the site of a terrible betrayal. Thelma Todd hadn't simply died under mysterious circumstances, she had been murdered to protect a powerful Hollywood conspiracy. Elizabeth, bound by fear and loyalty, had discovered the truth but had been unable to expose it. The house itself had absorbed the trauma, its walls bearing witness to the violence and deception, refusing to let the truth remain buried. Evelyn felt the house stir around her, as though it were testing her resolve. Shadows gathered in the corners of the chamber, coalescing into a single towering figure. It was the man from the vision, his face still obscured, his presence oppressive. "You should have left," the figure growled, his voice like the grinding of stone. But Evelyn stood her ground. She raised the diary and photograph, shouting, "The truth will come out. No matter what you do." The figure lunged, but as it reached her, the diary burst into flames, filling the room with blinding light. A scream echoed through the chamber, not of rage, but of release. When the light faded, the figure was gone, the room still and silent. Evelyn emerged from the basement at dawn. The weight of the house lifted. The air felt lighter, the oppressive energy gone. She spent the next weeks compiling her findings, publishing an exposé that sent shockwaves through Hollywood. The truth about Thelma Todd's murder, the hidden room, and the dark rituals of the Golden Age elites finally came to light. The mansion, once a trap for restless spirits, now seemed at peace. Evelyn left the house soon after, knowing her role was complete. She never returned, but those who passed the property swore it had changed. The once shadowy windows now gleamed in the sunlight, and the gardens bloomed with an otherworldly vibrancy. The house no longer whispered, its secrets finally laid to rest. But those who know its history often wonder, if walls can remember, what other stories might still linger, waiting for someone brave or foolish enough to uncover them. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story. Any coincidences with real events or characters are accidental.